Asaase Radio.
Is our country being governed by national interest policies or on mere political sensationalism? Are our statesmen living up to their promises captured in their manifestos? Are these policies being implemented indeed for the people? And do our leaders pay attention to the generation they call future leaders? These questions and their like are those that we find answers to on your late-night current affairs show, Candid Voice. On Candid Voice, we talk facts and we speak truth to power. Join me, Benjamin Ofeado, this and every Sunday night at 9 p.m. on Asaase Radio 99.5 with my panelists as we discuss the matters that matter to you. Candid Voice, as it is.
It is now definitive. AstraZeneca and Sputnik V are the vaccines selected by the government and approved so far by the Food and Drugs Authority for the COVID-19 vaccination here in Ghana. Also, on Wednesday, the 24th of February, Ghana took stock of the first tranche of the COVID vaccines from the COVAX initiative. Vaccination begins this week, the 2nd of March, and the president, together with the vice and their spouses, are billed to take the first shots. So, on this episode of Candid Voice, with respect to the Sputnik V and the AstraZeneca vaccines, we ask, what are their specific characteristics? What are their levels of efficacy? What are their specific side effects? And what should be one's response to such side effects? Also, with the vaccination program commencing, what is the plan? Who gets to be vaccinated? When will that be, and where will the vaccination take place? This is what we discuss on tonight's show that's tonight's episode of your show and our show, Candid Voice. We are live on radio on Asaase Radio 99.5 here in Accra and 123 FM 99.7 in Tamale, and also on Asaase Radio 98.5 megahertz in Kumasi. Online, we are live on Facebook at Asaase Radio 99.5, on YouTube on Asaase TV Official, and on the World Wide Web on AsaaseRadio.com. My name is Benjamin Ofeado, and I'm going to be your host for tonight. Well, we are joined by two very special persons who will be helping us answer some of these questions and a lot of other questions that we've had you share with us that we'll be putting to them. We've engaged a lot on social media, and a lot of questions have come up that we'll be putting to our panelists for this evening. But before we go to meet our panelists, well, the vaccination began in other jurisdictions. And we have one Ghanaian who out there in the UK has taken her shot. This person is one that is popular within the Ghanaian music circles, especially within the gospel music circles, Diana Entwi Hamilton. Let's go take a quick look at she taking her shot of the COVID-19 vaccine. And then we come back to begin our conversation.
That's a lie, I didn't So, do we get okay. Yes. Will I get a little bit of a stomach? I think I'm hungry. Okay. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that was Diana Entry Hamilton, gospel musician, Ghanaian gospel musician, taking her shot of the COVID-19 vaccine. We are joined today, this evening, on the show by one person who is not new to this show, one who's been a friend of this show, one that we've relied on a lot when it comes to the issues of COVID-19, the vaccination, the vaccine itself, development. And he joins us once again this evening, Dr. Justice Boakye Appiah, who is a medical practitioner himself. He is a clinical research fellow, and also an immunovaccinologist. Dr. Justice Boakye Appiah, thank you once again for joining us here on Candid Voice.
Thank you for having me, Ben, and good evening to your listeners.
Yes, we'll also be joined very soon by the program manager for the expanded program on immunization here in Ghana with the Ghana Health Service, Dr. Kwame Amponsa Achiano, who is the one leading the pack as far as this entire exercise of vaccination is concerned. We are privileged to have just heard from the president speak to us a few minutes ago. He spoke a lot about the fact that, yes, the vaccination program is beginning, and he, together with his vice and their spouses, and he mentioned a number of other prominent persons in society, together with whom they are going to be taking the first shots of the COVID-19 vaccine, as we have taken delivery of here in Ghana. We are the first country in the world to receive the COVID-19 vaccines under the COVAX initiative, and actually the second African country aside South Africa who themselves partook in the COVID trialing and so were prioritized when it came to they receiving the vaccine. So we find ourselves in a pretty privileged position, but the question is, do we have enough information about these vaccines, and are we at a place where we are comfortable about the rollout program and we know exactly how this is going to be done and where we should find ourselves when we get to partake of this? That's the conversation we'll be having this evening. Let me start with you, Dr. Justice Boakye Appiah, and thank you once again for joining us. Let's start with the COVID vaccines that we have chosen for Ghana, or the government has chosen for Ghana and have been approved by the Food and Drugs Authority. We know there's the Oxford AstraZeneca, and then there's the Sputnik V. We want you to talk to us specifically about each one of them. What is the special characteristics of these particular vaccines? We can start with the Oxford AstraZeneca.
Okay, so the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine is basically it relies on what we call a vector. Now, vectors are, so you take, let's say, these same viruses, okay? The viruses are such that they have a special ability to enter human cells, to infect human beings, okay? Now, if you take any of these vaccines, if you take the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, it uses a vector, and the vector is a very common virus called adenovirus. So the adenovirus is common in Ghana and many other countries. It causes common colds and so on. So they took that virus, okay? They took out all the material within the virus. So they basically emptied that virus and are only using the shell of the virus, meaning it cannot cause any infection, it cannot harm you in any way. It's just the shell. Think of it like a crab, the hard part of the crab. The reason why you have to use that is because that part or that shell has the ability to enter human viruses. The same way by which viruses infect human beings, you want to use that same method to put the vaccine into the human being.
Okay.
Then they have filled that shell, okay? They have filled it with genetic material, and this is where some controversies have come up with DNA and so on. So I'll explain. They filled it with genetic material from the coronavirus and put it into that virus, this vector. So this vector is going to enter the human being. Once it enters the human being, it's going to release the genetic material into the human being, and then the human being will produce, and everyone should listen before, don't draw conclusions there, I explain, will produce the parts of the coronavirus that we want. Now, back in the day, what viruses were, vaccines were made of whole viruses, so they would just take the full virus and then they'll put the full virus into the human being, and then the human being's body or your immune system will recognize it. Once it recognizes it, it develops antibodies to it. Next time when you have an infection, the antibodies fight for you. It's not just antibodies, it's many other things, but we just mentioned antibodies because that's the most common thing. Going forward, we have realized that your body does not necessarily recognize the whole virus. You don't need the whole virus to be able to build enough antibodies or to be able to build important antibodies. Mm-hmm. It's just specific parts of the virus that your body responds to or that your immune system responds to. Mm. So the thinking has for a long time now been that why don't we identify those specific points, and they are called vaccine targets, specific points on the virus which your body responds to. Yeah. So if we took let's say the chickenpox vaccine, which was first made many years ago, it was a weakened form of the chickenpox virus. But when you put that vaccine into the human being, it is not the full virus that the human being's immune system responds to. It only responds to a small part of it, certain parts of the virus. So why don't we identify those parts and rather pick those parts instead of putting a full virus in a human being? Because if you put the full virus in a human being, you say it is a weakened virus. It actually is a weakened virus. But for people with HIV, AIDS, and so on, what it means is that how weak is it for them? Their immune system is already weak, and you're going to put in a weak virus. For a strong person like me, I'll be fine. It will work well. But for someone who has HIV with a weak immune system, that virus, even though weak, could still harm them. So people with weak immune systems were not allowed to take vaccination. So people with HIV, people with AIDS were not allowed to take some of these vaccines. But now we know that if we take those small parts of the virus, which the body actually recognizes, we're able to get the same immune responses. Do you get it? Mm-hmm. So for the COVID virus, what we realized was that the immune response was actually targeted to a very small part of the virus on the surface called the spike protein. So you heard a lot about spike protein. And most of these vaccines that have been developed are targeting the spike protein. Okay. The immune system recognizes the spike protein, and if the spike protein is destroyed on the virus is not able to cause infection. Okay. These vaccines are designed such that they are targeting the spike protein. Now, some of the vaccines have just basically picked the spike protein itself from the virus. They have replicated it outside the virus or outside the human body, and they are injecting human people with that, as the vaccine. The Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine doesn't do that. It picks the genetic material that codes. So your DNA, there's a DNA that codes for parts of the body. That codes for that spike protein, not the human being. And this is very important. So the DNA that is in this vaccine is not human DNA. It is the DNA of the coronavirus that codes for the spike protein. And then it is put in this vector, which is the virus, the empty shell that I explained earlier.
Like the crab shell.
It enters your body. Yes, an empty shell. The crab shell scenario that I gave.
Yes.
Enters your body. It uses its ability to infect cells to go into your cells. Once it gets into your cells, it releases the genetic material that codes for the spike protein of the coronavirus. So your body now produces the spike protein. It is not your genetic material. It is not capable of affecting your genetic material because it is not human genetic material. So you now produce the spike protein. So far as you are producing the spike protein, it stays within your body. Your immune system recognizes the spike protein and continuously builds antibodies to it. Next time the coronavirus enters your body will identify the spike protein on the surface of the coronavirus and say, oh, I know this. I have parts of it here. I have already developed antibodies to it. It goes to attack the spike protein, it destroys the virus, and the virus is unable to cause infections. So the genetic material that people have made a lot of noise about, there are two types. There's a DNA, and then there's the RNA, the mRNA-based viruses. That's what the vaccines. That's what the mRNA-based ones. RNA is not stable. It's it rapidly deteriorates. It breaks down very quickly, and that is why the Pfizer vaccine, for instance, which has RNA as the genetic component, it must be stored at minus 70 degrees because it's not stable at all.
Okay.
And minus 70 is extremely cold. I keep using this illustration that your freezer at home, as cold as it is, just minus 20. But you need minus 70 to be able to store those vaccines because the genetic material is not stable. So once it gets into your body is too hot for it. Within a few minutes, it does its job and it all disintegrates. It cannot change your genetic material in any way because it is not human genetic material.
Okay.
In any case, that is actually how viruses survive. Viruses cannot live on their own. They are not able to reproduce. They are not living things in a sense that they are not able to reproduce.
They need a host.
Yeah. So they always use your host virus, the host virus, which is your virus, host cells, which is your cells, to divide or to replicate or to reproduce themselves. So that's how viruses give birth. They give birth by entering your body, inserting their genetic material into your cells, and then they cause your cells to start producing the virus. And that's how HIV works. All the other viruses, So HIV gets into your body, it attaches to your cells, it pushes its genetic material into your cells. Your cells now start producing the HIV virus. So you don't get 1 million HIV viruses entering your body. It's just a few. Then they inject their genetic material and cause your body to start producing. So if in certain genetic materials, for viruses, we're going to change human DNA, then anybody who has had any viral infection before should have had so many changes in
their DNA.
Yeah,
okay.
But it happens all the time. It's a natural process which has been going on. As we are talking now, I'm sure in your body there's some virus somewhere which is doing that to you, but your body will fight it eventually, so you'll know 4 seconds. And there are so many harmless viruses which survive by the same process, and it goes on and on and on. Okay. So the genetic material is not human genetic material. It is not capable of changing your DNA in any way. It is only a way for your body to produce the protein that you need to be able to fight it.
So by way of a wrap, the AstraZeneca vaccine, it deals with the spike on the virus. So and that is what it uses to build certain antibodies in your system, such that subsequently when the actual virus enters your system, it's able to identify it and say, oh, I know this type, and it fights against it. But also, it does not alter the composition of your DNA.
At all. Because viruses, by their natural means, insert their DNA all the time, their genetic material all the time into human cells. That is how they reproduce.
Okay.
And this has been going on in all human beings. Everybody catches, if you catch a cold, that is what has happened. So virus has inserted this genetic material and is causing you to reproduce more of it. So the Oxford vaccine, in fact, even the Russian Sputnik vaccine is also based on the same kind of model.
Okay.
The Pfizer vaccine, they are all just injecting or inserting the genetic material of the virus, not of human beings, of the virus into your cells, so that your cells will produce that spike protein of the virus. Then your immune system gets used to the spike protein, develops antibodies. Subsequently, when you get attacked by the virus, your immune system quickly mounts antibodies and other responses to go attack the spike virus, the spike protein of the coronavirus. And the spike protein is on the surface. If you look at the structure, it's on the surface.
Yes.
Once that is attacked, the virus cannot survive. And then and that's how.
Okay, all right. So now we understand that in terms of the characteristics or how the composition of the vaccine, that of the AstraZeneca is not different from that of the Sputnik V. Is that what you're saying?
So the difference here, now, in terms of the mechanism, which I explained, that is how they both work.
Okay.
But the difference between the Sputnik V, which is a Russian, and then the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine is that I explained the issue of vectors.
Yes.
And vector, the shell, okay?
Yes.
The shell that we put the genetic material into. So to be able to get the genetic material directly into your cells are, let's say, they are round things. They are circular and they are closed. It's not easy. They have very tiny pores. It's not very easy to insert the genetic material straight. But viruses, by their nature, are able to do this. They do it all the time. So if you want to insert some, important genetic material into cells, one way by which you can do it is to just pick a virus, which is harmless. And in this case, they use I mentioned the name of the virus. the adenovirus, which is a common virus, very common, causes cold. Pick a harmless virus, nothing major. Empty that virus of all its genetic materials and all the things which cause, which fill it up. Empty it completely. Just take the shell and put the genetic material that you want inside the shell. And that's a vector. So the shell is now the vector. It is empty. It cannot cause any disease. It cannot cause any problems because it has been emptied. It's only like a carrier to put what you want into the cell.
Yeah.
The two vaccines use different shells or different vectors. So the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine uses a chimpanzee adenovector. It's that adenovirus vector. So that vector is a virus that is from a virus that affects chimpanzees, not human beings. And the reason is that every human being, if we talk about adenoviruses, every human being, if you live in Ghana, you are likely to have had cold at some point. So I think many Ghanaians will have some immunity, a little immunity. It's not strong, and that's why you keep having cold. It is not one that will last a lifetime. But everybody would have had a little immunity to these adenoviruses. So to prevent your own body from fighting the vaccines when they come in, they decided to use a chimpanzee adenovirus, which does not infect human beings. It cannot infect human beings.
Okay.
The docking site or the point where it can attach to human beings to cause any problems, human beings don't have it. We don't have it. Only chimpanzees have it. So they used chimpanzee vectors, chimpanzee viral vectors, just so that you don't get what we call vector immunity, which is what I explained, that you may have been exposed to it. But the Russians used a human adenovirus, and they used two different human adenoviruses. So the first shot is one adenovirus, I call 5. The second one is 26, two different models. So it's just, it's the same strategy. One is using chimpanzee adenoviruses, and the other one is using human adenoviruses. The Russian one is using human adenoviruses. The Oxford AstraZeneca one is using chimpanzee
adenovirus. Okay.
And that has been used in some meningitis vaccines that are already on the market. So it's not a new technology.
Okay. Great.
Yes.
So in terms of the characteristics, in terms of the mechanism of fighting the virus, it is pretty much the same thing. It's just the kind of adenovirus which is used in the development of the vaccine that differs.
The shell, which is what we call the vector,
exactly.
The shell carrying them or the vector carrying them.
Okay.
That is different.
So now let's talk about, for instance, the AstraZeneca. All right. So you've just spoken about the characteristics of it. I want you to tell us specifically the. Let me just get this one here. The level of efficacy. So we know that a good number of the vaccines have efficacies beyond 90%. We know that there are a number of vaccines that have efficacies just above 50%, but are being used, some around 80%, 70%. For the AstraZeneca and for the Sputnik V, what are the levels of efficacy? So
in the cutoff efficacy, which was agreed, in making these vaccines is 50%, that if a vaccine is able to offer 50% protection, it should be passed. That's the agreed cutoff, 50%. Now, based on the kind of vaccine you're talking about and how the data is analyzed and so on, the efficacy varies, from place to place. From the way I explained to you how the Sputnik vaccine, for instance, works, the Russian Sputnik vaccine, for instance, works, I think it will not be too difficult for you to understand that the efficacy will vary from location to location. So, the Sputnik was trialed in Russia, basically, and I think the efficacy is about 91% or so.
Okay.
And that was in 20,000 people, tried in 20,000 people in Russia, and the efficacy was about 91%. I think, about. The Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, which I'm quite sure of because I've been quite involved in that.
Yes.
The efficacy, we had the trials were at different sites. So it was tried in South Africa, in the UK, and in Brazil. And then there were different combinations. So there were low dose and so on. But if you do the overall efficacy for what we'll be receiving in Ghana, as determined in the trials, is 72%. 72% for 2 doses.
Okay.
Now, the good thing about vaccines is that they have 2 roles. They play 2 roles. One, to prevent disease. That's the core function of a virus, to prevent disease.
core function of a vaccine.
Of a vaccine, is one, to prevent disease. But because it's not 100%, as I mentioned, and no drug is 100%, not paracetamol, nothing. If any drug were 100%, we would all live forever. No one would die. For those who do not benefit from the full effect of it, and again, let me take opportunity to mention that they take about a month for the full effect to set in. And that is why you may hear that someone has been vaccinated, but 1 week later came down with COVID, because it takes about a month for your body to build full immunity. It's a gradual process which could take up to a month from the first dose, before your body fully builds immunity. Now, for those who do not get the full effect of the vaccine, who do not fall within the 90% efficacy or the 72% efficacy, what the vaccine does for you is to reduce the severity of the disease when you get infected. Okay. So for the people who got vaccinated and who still caught the virus, for instance, the data is showing that they were asymptomatic. They did not have any symptoms, or even if they had any symptoms, they had very, very mild symptoms, and severity was cut. In Israel, where they have vaccinated up to 50% of their population, they are reporting a cut in hospitalization of about 95% amongst the population that has been vaccinated. 95%, meaning even those who tested positive did not have any symptoms at all, and were not getting the breathlessness which required them to go on a ventilator and so on. Okay. So either ways, it does provide cover. It does provide very good and significant cover for everybody.
Okay, so that's the levels of efficacy: 91 Sputnik V, 72 AstraZeneca minimum.
But let me mention the fact that, and I in the beginning I started by saying I usually don't like to quote efficacy figures without adding the conditions in the clause. And the conditions in the clause is that there's a chance for them to vary from place to place.
Yes.
Environmental factors matter a lot. For instance, and that is why Ghanaians should not be against drug trials here, and not just Ghanaians, but Africans in general should not be against drug trials. In conducting the trials here in the UK for these vaccines, I keep saying I have been amazed at the level of humanity of the white people. They're always very happy to come forward to say, oh, this is a problem that is affecting the world. I'm thinking about the next generation. I want to be part of the solution, and I'm happy for it to be trialed on me. The Pfizer vaccine was trialed on 42,000 people. You've had 42,000 people who walked up and were happy to, without getting paid. Nobody got paid for these things. It was tested on them before final approval was given. The AstraZeneca, as of November, when I knew the figures, was about 23,000 people had taken it. In the end, 60,000 people are for the trials, just trying it, But the good thing for them is that it was tried on them. It was tried in the environment. Whatever efficacy we have is based on this environment. Now Ghana is going to buy these vaccines. There's a chance that we may not record the same efficacy levels because the trials weren't conducted in Ghana, and that's a different environment, you see. So it's important that countries or individuals believe and trust the system enough to take part in drug trials. Otherwise, the figures may vary. I mean, there's the positive side of it, of sometimes recording better efficacy. For instance, Israel is giving better efficacy figures than Pfizer, the company that produced the vaccine originally gave, because Pfizer didn't try it in Israel. But it looks like the vaccine works better in the Israeli environment, so they are getting better efficacy. The counter can also happen, that you get lower efficacy figures because your environment is not conducive for the vaccine. We don't know what will happen in Ghana.
We've been informed that we had officers from the FDA be in some of these labs where these vaccines have been produced, both for the AstraZeneca and then the Pfizer as well. But let's talk now specifically about some of the side effects of both that we are going to be taking stock of here in Ghana. The AstraZeneca, and I know that for all vaccines, there are specific side effects that come with them. Specific to these COVID vaccines, AstraZeneca and then Sputnik V, you can take them one after the other. What are the specific side effects that come with these?
So, things like fever are basically immune responses. So, fever, flu-like symptoms, they're not very, very specific. A person may have a little pain at the site of injection and so on, but there hasn't been anything major for my site for the the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine trials, we didn't experience any significant things. There was no adverse response to any of it. There was an issue. There were cases of recorded cases of transverse myelitis in other sites, but they eventually, on investigation, there was no direct link to the vaccines. So what you can expect is a little pain at the site of injection. There may also be, you may have a little fever, which will last a day, have a little flu-like symptoms. It's not specific. You feel a bit, how do I describe that? I think everybody knows what flu-like symptoms are. It's nothing very specific, like you have a bad cold, that sort of feeling. You can feel that way for up to 24 hours. But that's why we advise that before you take the vaccine, just take 2 tablets of paracetamol, not ibuprofen though, paracetamol, and it's able to deal with it. So we are not expecting any major adverse reactions from these things. Fertility is not affected. Potency, was that a word for it? Sexual, it is not affected in any way. Men are not, you're not going to lose your ability to sustain an erection or anything like that. None of that happens. The worst will be to have flu-like symptoms for up to 24 hours. And then you go home. It doesn't contain any eggs for anybody to react to or anything like that. We have not seen any adverse reactions to these things. As I mentioned, it's only the 2 transverse myelitis cases, but that's about it. But those were not, even on further investigation, there was no direct established link to the vaccines. For the Sputnik, it's about the same thing. But because human adenoviruses are more common in Ghana, people are more likely, I think, because there will be some baseline immunity to the vector. You may record a few more fevers within 24 hours and a few more flu-like symptoms within 24 hours, but that should be fine. I would recommend that they add paracetamol, just some doses of paracetamol to the vaccination. It's done in children. And if we add it, I think majority of the people should be fine. In the UK, we've rolled it out. So many people have been vaccinated. Very, very few people came up with these flu-like symptoms, but nothing major has been reported.
Okay, so when you say they should add paracetamol, are you saying it should be taken before the vaccine is administered or after the vaccine has been administered?
For the first 24 hours, just for the first 24 hours, you can take it with the vaccine. You can take it immediately after the vaccine, immediately before. But for the first 24 hours, it's good to be on some paracetamol. I'm not going to be prescribing on, but I think the national program will know what to do about these things. They must have had the recommendations, and I'm sure they will know what to do.
Okay, so how about, so you are speaking about responses, and now you've mentioned the paracetamol. Beyond the pain, because we know most of the time that paracetamol deals with, say, the pain and all of that. Beyond the pain that the paracetamol deals with, what should be the other responses to some of these side effects that you talk about? Should people be drinking, say, a lot more water? Because we know that normally when you have a common cold, one of the things you're advised is to take a lot more water. I mean, to just cleanse your system. It helps with the recovery. Should that one, for instance, be one of the responses to some of these side effects?
I mean, paracetamol is not just for the pain, though. It's also for fevers. Potential fevers that could come from your immune response to the vaccine. If you have been infected before, if you've suffered COVID and have responded and have recovered, your immune system will not be meeting the vaccine. The vaccine will be the second time your immune system will be coming into contact with anything COVID related. So your immune system will respond. It could give you a little fever here and there, but that is why the paracetamol will also help you. So it's not just the pain; it's also for the little fevers and the flu-like symptoms. I mean, you can drink a lot of water, but I don't think that would make too much of a difference. But it's just a 24-hour thing mostly, and then you are fine. But that is not even people. It's rather a minority of the people involved.
Okay, all right. So let's stay with the vaccine and how to deal with some of these challenges. There have been a number of questions that have come through. Someone is asking, for instance, when it comes to certain, when you are taking certain medications, you are advised not to take certain things. For instance, when you are taking a certain medication, you are told not to take milk or something of the sort. What are some of the things to avoid before taking the shot or just after taking the shot?
So far, there's nothing like that. It's fine. It goes with everything. Nothing. Nobody is told not to take anything. It's fine so far.
So, specifically, for instance, is it okay to take alcohol before taking the shot or even after? You are laughing. It's a very serious matter.
You should probably not take alcohol at all. You should probably not take alcohol at all. There's nothing wrong with it. But it's not rigid. The way the vaccine works, it's not like your regular drug, which will directly enter your body and interact with your blood and things like that. There hasn't been any recommendation on any of these things. We haven't seen any problems with that. I haven't seen any paper stating anything like that. Live your life. You can just take the paracetamol just to prevent the fever and the flu-like symptoms, but that's it. It's nothing really.
Okay.
If you avoid alcohol, I would say avoid alcohol any day. I wouldn't.
Okay, there are certain people who cannot avoid alcohol any day. But if you're listening to us, we are still live on Asaase Radio 99.5. This is Candid Voice, and today we are talking fighting COVID in Ghana, the vaccine and the vaccination program. And we have been joined from the beginning by Dr. Justice Boakye Appiah, himself an immunovaccinologist, a clinical research fellow who has been very much a part of the development of the AstraZeneca vaccine, and himself a medical practitioner who's been treating COVID patients and also administering some of these vaccines. We are very fortunate to have just been joined by the programs manager for the expanded program on immunization for the Ghana Health Service. He himself is going to be spearheading this entire activity of vaccination, and he's in the person of Dr. Kwame Amponsa Echiano. Doc, please, you're welcome to the show. Hello, Doc. If you could please unmute your mic. All right. We'll get back to Doc, and we are going to put a few questions to him, especially on the vaccination program, the rollout program, and how things are going to go like. But let's stay a bit more with Justice. Justice, we've been told about a 2-dose arrangement for these vaccines. Is it the same for both the Sputnik and for the AstraZeneca? And what is the rationale behind the Sputnik, the double dose for the vaccines?
Yeah. So for both vaccines, you're getting a double dose. There's only one licensed vaccine, which is a single dose. I think that's the J&J. I got licensed in America yesterday or Friday, I think. But all the others are double doses. And generally vaccines are multiple doses. There are very few single dose vaccines. So the measles vaccine, the rubella vaccine, they all, you take multiple, doses of them. The idea is just a booster. So the first one is what we call a primer. Introduce it to your immune system. The second one is a booster to increase efficacy. So it's basically just to make it work better. Yeah, it's not. It's just to make it work better. They are boosters. We call them boosters. So you boost. So if you take your hepatitis B vaccine, for instance, you take your first shot. I think the second shot is it 2 weeks later? Your third shot is it 2 weeks or a month later? I don't remember the schedule. But 5 years later, you are asked to check the titers to check to see if your antibody levels are still that strong. If they are not strong, you are asked to take a booster vaccine 5 years after your first dose. So it's normal to get boosters, and boosters are for synergistic purposes, improve the efficacy of the vaccine. That's the idea behind it.
Okay. How about the case of, so is it the case that you taking the second dose, for instance, improves the efficacy in any way?
Yeah. So for the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, for instance, the first dose gives you 62. It gives you about 62%, and then the second dose increases it to about 72%. And so one of the key things I'm keen to hear from Dr. Chan, who we are trying to get onto the show, is how they're going to roll out the vaccination for the 600,000. They have the option of giving 600,000 people one dose each, which would mean everybody gets about 60% protection, and then wait till they have more vaccines to give everybody a second dose, or they have the option of giving 300,000 people 2 doses, which would mean each of them getting the optimal 72% protection. I don't know which choice they take, which one they chose, but I'll be keen to know what their plan is for that. In the UK plan was to give everybody one dose and to stretch the second dose as far as possible. So it was stretched to 12 weeks, even though the manufacturer recommended the 3-week difference. was stretched to 12 weeks to get the second dose so that we can give as many people as possible one dose, which will give some protection. And then later on, as the vaccines come in, we go to give people the second doses as well.
In between the two shots or the two doses, if one takes the first dose, and would a person be okay to not wear his or her mask, knowing that I've taken the vaccine, so I am free?
So the issue of masks, I think, has become quite interesting. I didn't think it was going to gather that much interest, but it seemed to have gathered that much interest. So let me take my time to explain it. Now, when you wear a mask, you wear a mask for two reasons. One, to protect yourself, and two, to protect other people, to prevent you from passing the infection on to other people. Traditionally, if you take the hepatitis vaccine, for instance, once you get vaccinated, it goes into your blood, starts working in your blood. If the hepatitis virus enters your blood, you will have antibodies and T-cell responses and so on to be able to fight the virus, okay? The virus doesn't survive anywhere else apart from the blood, in the blood. So once you've taken the virus, you know that you are not likely to transfer the virus onto other people once you take the vaccine, because if the virus is in your body, it will live within your blood or within wherever it will live. And all those areas are accessible by these antibodies. Okay. So for people who have taken Hep B vaccine, chance of passing the virus on to someone is not. But when you take viruses which are able to live outside the bloodstream, like the coronavirus, which mostly lives within your nostrils, your nose and your throat, which is where it mostly lives, we needed to be sure that taking the vaccine, which goes into your blood, some of the antibodies will be able to leak or seep into these areas to sterilize, or use the word sterilize, so to clear those areas as well. And that question was not answered initially. It was difficult to answer that question. So what we could say was that if you take the vaccine, if the virus enters your blood, your body will take care of it. You're not going to get COVID. However, if the virus did not enter your blood and it just came to lie, to stay cool in your nostrils, what was going to happen? Would your body clear it? You would not get infected. That we are sure of, because it will not be able to survive in your blood. But it's just lying in your nostrils. It's not causing any problems in your body. Will the antibodies leak into those areas to go and clear the virus? So after taking the vaccine, it takes about a month, as I mentioned earlier, for your body to build full immunity to it. For the first month after taking the vaccine, you wear a mask because you can still get infected. You must have heard stories about people getting infected a week or two after taking the virus. It's because the body, after taking the vaccine, because the body had not built full immunity within that period, and that is why they could still get infected. But after about a month, you're fine. So theoretically, you should wear your mask for the first month because it is going to protect you. You are still capable of catching the virus within that time until your body builds full immunity. But after that 1 month, you were still asked to wear it because we had not answered the question of whether or not the antibodies are able to seep into your nostrils and into your throat to go and kill viruses which are just living there and not causing any problems for you. The data emerging is that the vaccines are able to do that, and this is very fresh data that is emerging. I think just about a week or two, old. It's emerging that some of the antibodies, and they're called IgE antibodies, which work, in the mucosal surfaces. Mucosa is like your not the skin area, but if you take your nose, the red parts, your throat and so on, it's able to go in there, seep in there to go and clear the vaccine. So the viruses. So they sort of are able to sterilize those areas and to cut transmission very, very significantly. Meaning going forward, we're going to get to a situation where once we've attained herd immunity, people are going to be allowed to take their masks off after about a month of vaccination. But in the first month, you still have to wear it to protect yourself, because at that time, your body is still building immunity and anything can happen.
Okay.
After that, it's likely, but it hasn't become policy yet, but going forward, I think that's where we'll be heading towards.
You talk about herd immunity, and we've heard it being bundled around so much. A lot of people, the president has spoken about herd immunity. The Ghana Health Service is speaking about herd immunity. What is herd immunity?
So herd immunity is a concept based on, I'm sure, I don't know if you must have heard the figure R naught, the name R naught, they say R naught. are not. So herd immunity simply says that, okay, if we are in this community and there are 100 of us, okay, if 70 people catch it, have immunity, have protection to the virus, what it means is that those 70 people cannot be sick, okay, of the virus. If they cannot be sick of the virus and the virus can also not stay within them, then there's a very little chance for them to pass the virus onto other people or onto the 30% who do not have immunity. So the immunity the 70% have now goes to protect even the 30% who do not have immunity.
How does that happen?
So as I explained, there are 10 of us, 7 or 8 cannot catch the virus. Let's use chickenpox.
Yes.
You have 10 children. You know that once you get chickenpox, you can't catch it a second time unless you get HIV or AIDS or something. You catch it once. If you catch chickenpox twice, that's trouble. But you catch it the first time. Every child has it. So 10 teenagers in a room. Out of the 10 teenagers, 8 have already caught chickenpox. What it means is that all those 8 who have caught chickenpox, they cannot catch chickenpox again. Mm-hmm. And they're also not capable of, if the chickenpox even enters the room, they are not capable of catching the virus and passing it on to the 2 who have not caught the chickenpox.
So they cannot transmit.
So they cannot transmit it either. So basically, because of the 8 people who are immune to it, the other 2, chances of the other 2 catching the virus become very, very low, extremely low, because there will be no place. And as viruses cannot live in the air. They can't survive on their own for long. They'll die off. They always need a human body to reside in to be able to reproduce and keep themselves alive. So if those people are protected, then it also implies that the other 2, the few people in there, also get protected. So if you are thinking about, there are ways of achieving herd immunity. You can either do it naturally, which is what happens with chickenpox, for instance, the example that I gave, which would be that they caught the infection and then they developed immunity to it. You can also do it through vaccination. So in vaccinations, you don't need to vaccinate 100% of the population. There's a calculated figure of people that you need to vaccinate. And once you do that and you achieve, everybody, general protection is available for everybody. And it is based on, it varies from infection to infection. It's just based on how transmissible the infection is using a calculation formula.
So, by way of a summary, it's just basically a significant percentage of a population attaining immunity in such a way that it breaks the transmission to the rest of the population.
Exactly. And for COVID, it has been calculated to be around 70%. I think it's between 67 to 70%. But if you want to be absolutely sure, countries may want to go up to about 75% of their people, if you're able to vaccinate about 70 to 75% of your population.
Okay. Great. We are fortunate to be joined once again by Dr. Amponsa Achiano. Doc, welcome to the show. Quickly, about the rollout plan, specifically for Ghana, what is the plan? We heard the president speak to us. If you could just detail it for us, specifically what the plan is as far as the COVID vaccination is concerned.
Okay, thank you very much. I've been on for quite a while, listening to my colleague on the other side.
Yes,
I'm happy to be on board. The plan is that ultimately we want to vaccinate 100% of the population, all things being equal. According to the president, he's making provision for everybody to be vaccinated. However, for now, we do not have enough safety data on pregnant women and children under 18 years, especially for the AstraZeneca vaccine, and for some other vaccines, children under 16 years. In the interim, our target is to vaccinate 20 million people, which would form approximately 65% of the population. And this is where the issue or the concept of herd immunity comes in. Nobody really knows the percentage for herd immunity, but as my colleague said, it's somewhere between 60 for some countries, going up to 70. And so once you get a critical mass of people vaccinated and transmission is broken, then you've achieved herd immunity, directly, indirectly. So herd immunity, as he rightly said, is when you have a critical mass of people vaccinated, such that you do not need to vaccinate the rest of the people, and you have achieved a herd immunity. So if we're able to achieve herd immunity, then obviously we don't even need to cover the other so-called left outs. And that is the plan. But traditionally, when we are doing vaccination exercises in campaign form, we get all our vaccines, sometimes 3 clear months, 4 clear months, and then we do the campaign at a go. This time, because of pressure on the manufacturers, the whole globe is going to the same market, about 7 or so manufacturers for the same vaccine. So there's a lot of pressure. And therefore, we are unable to get the vaccine. Even if you have all the money, you cannot get the vaccines at a go. Therefore, we're getting the vaccines in trickles. And that is why the president's speech, he spoke about the segmentation. So we have to segment the population and also segment by geography, so that the trickles that we get, we plan well and vaccinate the most at risk, followed by those who provide other essential services, the rest of the population. And ultimately, when we have enough data on safety, then the children and pregnant women will also be considered.
All right.
So that is the plan for Ghana.
So 20 million out of our total population of about 30 million, and that you are projecting to cover about 60, a little above 60% of the entire population. Let me ask you specifically this. The president talks about 4 different groupings that are going to be taken care of, and if you could just walk us through the specific groupings.
Yeah, so the group 1 is the most at-risk people. Frontline health workers, the persons 60 years and above, those with underlying conditions, frontline security persons, and then also people who provide some essential services. Those are in the first category. Then you have the group 2, which is looking at essentially those who provide water, electricity, transport services, whether it's air or ground, the metro people, in fact, those who get the nation running in terms of social services. Of course, we would also have considered some religious and traditional leaders who, as it were, once they take the vaccine, will engender demand. So I would say that strategically we've also considered some of these. Then the third group would then be the rest of the general population who are 18 years and above. There's also a 4th group, as I mentioned, children and pregnant women. But because we do not have enough safety data, for now, they will be exempted from the initial doses. It should be known that we are looking for.
Okay, so an important question that has been asked by a number of persons, including your co-panelist: what is our strategy going to be with this 600,000? Are we going to identify 600,000 persons to be given a first dose, or we are going to be identifying 300,000 people to be given 2 doses? What's the government strategy?
So the straight answer for you is we're going to vaccinate approximately 600,000 people for first dose. Actually, when we're doing mass campaigns or any campaign or any vaccination exercise, you need to factor in wastage. Accidentally, some may spill, some may get broken, some may be exposed excessively to heat and all that. We will try and minimize that, but we still have to, as it were, plan for wastage. So that's why I said approximately 600,000. It is not likely that you get all the 600,000 doses to 600,000 people. This is because the 600,000 doses is only a component of 2.4 million that we're getting from the COVAX facility. And so in the next 2 weeks, we're getting the rest of the, up to May, but in the next 2 weeks, we are getting the next consignment.
Okay.
And so there was a lot of thought process. We discussed it, we debated, and we finally agreed that no, we need to give it, because it will not be wise to put these vaccines down when you know you are getting some additional vaccines. So what it means is I already plan for 100, keep the 300,000, keep the other 300,000. Meanwhile, you know, in the next 2 weeks, maximum 1 month, we are getting another consignment, which will be more than the 600,000. And again, the interval between first and second doses for us in Ghana is 8 weeks. The manufacturer recommends for to 12 weeks. WHO says that the longer the better. And so they recommend 8 to 12 weeks, which is still within the manufacturer's recommendation though. So we as a country have settled in the middle, 8 weeks. So within that 8 weeks, definitely we'll get those vaccines and give them.
All right. You talk about the subsequent tranches that will be coming in about 2 weeks, for instance, the next one. Where is that one coming from? Is that still coming from the COVAX initiative or this specific procurement?
The COVAX facility. But I know government has negotiated to purchase from other manufacturers. So, for example, I know there are discussions to get 10 million doses of the Sputnik vaccine. But what I mentioned is that COVAX is giving us vaccines for approximately 20% of the population, which translates to about 12.4 million if we are sticking to the 2-dose vaccines. I mean, the vaccines that are supposed to be given in 2 doses. And so that will be about 12.4 million.
All right. And in terms of the distribution, we heard the president talk about in excess of 40 districts that are the epicenters as far as this particular virus is concerned. What is the distribution like in terms of the regions for these particular districts?
Okay, so because of the fact that we had few doses relative to the population, we had to do geographic segmentation using the data on hand. So the data suggests that the Greater Accra Metro, which is more or less the Accra Metro, plus the contiguous district surrounding it, and then Kaswa and its adjacent district, the other district. So Ewutu Senior East and Ewutu Senior. So 2 in Central, 25 in Greater Accra, 16 in Greater Kumasi. So Greater Kumasi used advisedly just as Greater Accra region. Yes, Greater Accra Metro has 16, and it's Kumasi Metro itself plus the contiguous districts around it.
So, and what is the database from which you are going to be able to make this determination of who falls within what category? What database or data set is available to you to identify these various groupings as you have planned to roll out the vaccination for?
Okay, so for health workers, it's not a problem because they work in the facilities, they work in whether it's public or private, they work in the hospital, so that is easy to get. The next will be the people with underlying conditions. So we linked up with the region, and then the big hospitals, Konfanochi Teaching Hospital, Kolenu Teaching Hospital, who provided the numbers for us because many people attend those clinics, the dietary clinics and then the chronic disease clinics. So, for example, in Kolebu, we have about 13,000 people. Konfanochi's numbers, I don't remember exactly, but it's quite also high, about more than 8,000 or so. So these have been factored in the distribution. And then also the districts were tasked to submit all those who have chronic ailments who attend clinics within their respective areas, and they've submitted that as well. Additionally, as part of the social mobilization communication strategies, they will be liaising with the churches, they will be announcing for people who know they have underlying conditions, who come up with their doctor's reports or some kind of evidence to show that they have. For the security persons, it's easy to get the frontline security. We are in link with them. We have all their data in terms of numbers. Some even gave us a list of the people. So we are treating them as a separate entity. Yesterday, we trained 37 and police hospital together, about 60 or so people, not just for their own campaign or their own vaccination exercise, but also to support the. Remember, tomorrow is the president's, as it were. The president will take his job, so we train them to support in that sense. So they have identified their people. We're giving them the vaccine. In fact, the vaccines are already delivered to the regional health directory, so we cut the vaccines from there. We also distributed vaccines to Kumasi, and Konfanochi will pick up vaccines from there. So for those ones, it's not a difficult thing. For the elderly, Of course, we are encouraging everybody to make available any of the ID cards, whether biometric or non-biometric. At least that will give us some idea of the age. We will also ask them to go to the nearest clinics and the health centers and also the outreach points that the districts will be using as vaccination sites. Remember that the district is a unit of operation, so we at the national level will only guide them, but they know it best. They know how to get the people. And they tell us that for the elderly, they will get quite a number of them from the churches and mosques, because most of them are religious and they attend churches or they attend the mosques. So that's the approach we take. Over.
Okay, so I was going to ask you about the locations from which the vaccinations will be done, but you have clearly indicated that there's a decentralized system where it's going to be administered as low as the district level and even community levels. So,
exactly.
so that's how it's going to be done. This particular question has come up because in the UK, for instance, your colleague, Dr. Boachiapia, lets us know that, for instance, to deal with some of the side effects, they take paracetamol, for instance, to deal with the fever that may be attendant with it, the headache, and all of a bit of the short uneasiness. What is our strategy in this regard when it comes to dealing with some of these side effects here in Ghana?
Yeah, that is not too different. So what will happen is that at the point of vaccination, at the vaccination center, the nurses who have been trained, nurses and the other health workers who have been trained will counsel them on these side effects or adverse events. And so when it happens, they take the paracetamol, whilst also doing what we call a therapy responding. In fact, these are expected. I will still expect them to report anyway, because we don't have baseline data in Ghana for on fever, and of course, knowing that COVID is also a new COVID vaccines are new. So we will take every data from them. Again, we've trained them to use emergency medicines. There are some cases where you have very rare events. And as a medical practitioner, I know what a factor X is. Normally, when you don't prepare, you get issues, especially in surgery. It's called factor X. So normally, when we go out on vaccination, we prepare very well to deal with the very unexpected, very rare adverse events like anaphylactic shock. So we have trained them to be able to administer adrenaline, because they do that best. They give subcutaneous injections and all that. So they've been trained to do that, and we are supplying them with those emergency medicines, including adrenaline and hydrocortisone. So that's the strategy for the adverse events.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the vaccines. So listening to Dr. Boachiapia, he speaks about the vector situation, especially with the development of the Sputnik V vaccine. We know the FDA has gone through a number of processes to deal with this, but for you overseeing this kind of program, in terms of the development of the Sputnik V vaccine, having had specific testing in just say Moscow in Russia, for instance, how do we here in Ghana seek to deal with that vector issue that comes with it, as opposed to the case of the AstraZeneca vaccine?
I really don't appreciate your question because it's not very clear to me.
So, in the development of the AstraZeneca vaccine, as we've okay, Justice, if you would want to come in.
Just to make it clear, I think because I think what he's trying to ask, I was explaining the issue of vectors and the vectors that are used, and the fact that they are common, and the fact that the main difference between the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine and the Sputnik vaccine is the fact that the Oxford vaccine uses chimpanzee adenovirus vectors, and the Sputnik uses human adenovirus vectors. And the fact in Ghana, everybody's likely to have come into contact at some point with the human adenovirus vectors, because it's quite common. There's a chance for vector immunity or anti-vector immunity, and people may be getting a few more of these fevers and flu-like symptoms after the vaccination. And I suppose that's what he's trying to find out. He's trying to ask about basically anti-bacterial immunity using, because in Russia, you don't have too many of these adenoviruses in the environment as compared to Africa, where we have quite a number of them. And everybody's likely to definitely have some baseline immunity to it.
So monitoring, this will boil down to monitoring of adverse events, if I understand it correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so,
and the monitoring of adverse events, I'm probably not the one asking the questions, but as to whether or not we have anything, what's our plan to monitor for our own efficacy? Because looking at even the Israeli data that is coming out, it turns out that the efficacy over there is a bit different from the manufacturer's efficacy figures, which is the Pfizer efficacy figures, because the trials were conducted elsewhere, and then the vaccines are also being used elsewhere. There could be variation in efficacy because of...
Yes, so maybe I'm getting I'm getting the impression that we're asking of effectiveness, definitely not efficacy.
Well,
yes, I think that's what you're talking about. In the real world, what will happen?
What will happen? Yeah.
And so yes, what I'm aware of is that the ministry is commissioning special studies as part of the monitoring of adverse events, because that also, or should I say, monitoring of safety. Because if it is not as efficacious as we think it should be, then it has safety issues. So the FDA and the MOH, Ministry of Health, are both commissioning a study that will look into effectiveness, that is in the real world. But added to that is the plan for safety. So what we're doing in safety is we have set up sentinel sites to do active follow-up at least 3 times before day 28. But in our plan, we are looking at day 1 of vaccination, day 3, day 7, day 14, and day 28. Actively, we are training people tomorrow in those facilities, 2 in Ashanti, 2 in Greater Accra Metro, and I think 1 in the Kaswa Polyclinic. So where people will actively follow up. Quite apart from these, we also are doing the routine passive, where people are reporting on their own. So there's an app called the Best Safety app, which has been in use. It was developed with the help of the UK, is it MRHA or MHRA? That's the equivalent of FDA.
MHRA.
We've been using this for 2 years, and that's what we're going to use to report. Additionally, we are also setting up a call center where people can easily call. Of course, there's also the FDA call center, which is already in existence, which people can call, and so that data on them can be taken when they have adverse events. So that is the plan for. Of course, we also do enhanced passive reporting, where we send reminders to facilities and district focal persons for adverse event monitoring to report, and that those are the plans for safety.
Okay, Doc, let me ask about. We know there is an app that is being deployed, for instance, for scheduling for people to go have their jabs taken, for instance. Can you please speak to us a bit about this particular application?
No, we are not using any app for scheduling. We are using the e-tracking system. We record data that is only at a point of vaccination. So what the districts are doing is that they are using the traditional communication strategies to get people to the vaccination centers. We are not using an app yet. It may come at some point, but for now, we are not using it.
Okay, we know vaccination has been done in this country since 1978, and a lot of vaccines have come through. This particular time, unlike then, where we had a lot of public service communication in this regard, public health communication, I should even say, about the childhood killer diseases. We had a lot of songs being made for this purpose. In terms of communication, with respect to this particular vaccination program, what has been the strategy?
Okay, so first of all, vaccination in Ghana didn't start in 1970s, long before. I, as a child, in 1975, I took smallpox vaccine in Ghana. So definitely vaccination didn't start in 1978, but long before. In the 1970s, early 1970s, or even towards the latter part of 1960s, there also yellow fever vaccination exercise done. What I would say about our communication strategy is that I think the maybe COVID vaccine has received the most attention in terms of vaccine, to the extent that even the Ministry of Information is talking about COVID vaccine. It doesn't normally happen. So I disagree to a very large extent that, unlike the childhood vaccines, we are not giving enough education. I think that it is the expectations that probably is too high on COVID vaccines. Otherwise, this is the vaccine, this is the only vaccine that we have engaged widely. GMA, the Ghana Medical Association, the Pharmaceutical Association, we've engaged the nurses, we've engaged religious leaders, parliament, we've engaged the media. I personally have made several presentations. But remember, the childhood immunizations are not a one-time thing. It is an ongoing process. And this one will just be a one-off. And so you don't expect that for a childhood immunization that started in 1978. I think that's what we were talking about, the routine. And it's ongoing. Definitely there will be more communication because it's been going on for 40 years. We are talking about COVID vaccines that were received in 4 days or 4 days ago. So you can't compare the two.
No, but
the strategy
but
that we've had a lot.
Didn't you know we were going to take delivery of these particular vaccines? The reason for which we could plan.
So what we did know was that we were going to take vaccines, but we didn't know we were going to take AstraZeneca vaccines. We were getting, because we have in our plan many of these vaccines, as we were hoping that these other vaccines, including Moderna, Pfizer, and so on, would pass emergency use. But as I speak now, it's only AstraZeneca that has passed emergency use. AstraZeneca and Sputnik, sorry. The rest haven't. We even requested for the dossier, and it's taking a long time to get that. If FDA will tell you. We did know, but we didn't even know when it was coming. So if you go onto the market and start talking about vaccination, the question is, when are you getting vaccines? You don't even know. When are you going to deliver? You don't know. What are you doing to the public? So as soon as we got this, we started drumming. And it's not just a one-time thing. We are hoping that we'll finish somewhere in October, November. We've done our jingles. We've started playing them. We've done flyers. We've done posters. We've done a lot of engagements, and the engagements will be ongoing. So the communication strategy has been produced, and that's what we're using to guide our communication process. And again, the district is the unit of operation. So at the national level, you may think nothing is going on, but they are doing their own work in the districts. I trust that they will do a good job.
Well, Doc, we here in the media, and I can speak specifically for Asaase Radio, we are very much interested in helping with this mass communication. So once you've developed your jingles and your LPMs, you can let us have copies of those to help with the public education. But just to wrap up, Dr. Justice Boshapia, anything you have else by way of last words, even as we wrap up?
I think I have been quite I have been quite worried at the rate of vaccine hesitance in Ghana. I think people are still very reluctant, to take the vaccines. I'm praying that in the coming week, as the jingles Dr. Achanu is talking about start playing, and as they start doing a lot more publicity on it, and as people see the president take his vaccines and the vice president take his vaccines, and possibly maybe the MPs who are local representatives of the people as well, and some of the chiefs and so on, take it publicly, and people see videos and pictures of these leaders they know take the vaccines, there will be an increase in the level of confidence. But as it stands now, I'm quite worried. You are aware I've been doing these things on my Facebook or writing a lot about COVID vaccines and trying to answer people's questions, and the kind of responses I get is a bit worried. We unfortunately seem to have allowed conspiracy theories to carry the day, but I'm happy we are eventually bouncing back. I'm sure from tomorrow, when people see the president take it, I'm quite optimistic it will make a difference. Let's see how things roll. But I'm very keen on there being a very important follow-up to obtain our own data. These vaccines were not trialed in Ghana. We're not part of the trials. In South Africa, for instance, they were part of the Oxford AstraZeneca trial. By the time they got the vaccines, the strain had changed. The strain they were facing had changed. And so vaccines didn't work for the particular strain they were struggling with. Not that the vaccines were not working, but they didn't work for those particular strains that they were struggling with. Ghana, fortunately, has a good, when I say I use good in quotes, good strain profile, on which these vaccines are known to work quite comfortably. So fingers crossed that we do not start seeing any new strains rear their heads. If not, then the vaccines should be able to work. But we should gather our own data going forward and not rely on just the manufacturer's data. Things will change. Our environment is different. We may not be recording the same figures as the manufacturer has given or as other countries are mentioning. So unlike how we would do things with other medications and our way of doing things, or we bought it from the manufacturer said it is this, and so we continue with that. In this case, it's quite clear that our environment being different, the figures will be different. We should gather our own data for future advice and for future policy, else we may get lost and people will lose confidence in the system. And I'm very particular about this because I think, God forbid, but if the COVID vaccines fail, Dr. Chanu's program, the expanded program of immunization, will suffer hugely because people are going to lose confidence in vaccines, and that will bring its own attendance problem. So we need to be sure, to make sure we are making this work. That it must work. It must work, and if it will work, proper research, which I'm passionate about, should be attached to the rollout, and we should not just stick to the figures as are coming from other countries. Fingers crossed, we can all monitor and pray and see how things will go.
I'm sure Dr. Asaase Achiano and his team are duly taking cognizance of these things and are putting measures in place. But Dr. Asaase Achiano, your final words, you have an opportunity. Tomorrow we are starting, the president is together with the vice and their spouses, together with certain other key persons of our state, are taking the first jabs. What is your message to Ghanaians that concerning this particular vaccination program that we'll be embarking on?
Yes, I think Dr. Boachi has already reiterated what taking the wind out of my sail. Vaccine hesitancy has been a problem, and we need to get over this. But tomorrow is only the president, the vice president, and their spouses, and a few other health workers, because once we open the vial, we need to complete that, and we need to finish it.
Yeah.
I do not think that there are other dignitaries who will be taking the vaccine. So officially, we are starting on Tuesday.
On Tuesday, okay.
So that's by way of correction.
Yeah.
But again, we want to employ upon the country that the vaccines are safe. For vaccines save lives, and that is why we have record to show. Measles of old is no longer there. Even currently, I don't think the doctors who have just passed out be able to recognize measles because they haven't seen it in their training. Polio has been eradicated because of vaccines. We have eliminated neonatal tetanus since 2011. Since 2003, no person has died of measles as documented. And then obviously yellow fever is also almost a thing of the past. So the evidence is clear. And therefore, we want to urge all people that if we have to get out of these woods and get back to our ways, it's vaccination and nothing else. And that is the surest bet. So we want to encourage people to massively take part, especially for those who are built to take the vaccines come Tuesday.
All right.
And they are safe. I keep hitting on the safety because it's important for me.
Yeah.
They are very safe. They have been tried in huge numbers of people before being rolled out. They are safe. There's nothing to worry about when it comes to safety. if that is the main concern, I don't think anybody should be worried at all. I have seen many people who have been vaccinated, even before it received official authorization during the trials. I saw many people, who were involved in the trials. I was attending to them daily, and they were safe. I didn't see any adverse. In my trial center, I didn't record any adverse event in anybody at all. The two transverse myelitis cases that were recorded in other trial centers were investigated, and it wasn't linked to it. And we are talking about trials that had, as of November, when I was leaving that phase of it, had about 23,000 people already recruited, and 2 cases which are not necessarily directly linked. That's quite a good one. The Pfizer one, 40,000. The Sputnik one, 20,000 people. It's safe. Nobody has died from a vaccination. Don't listen to any of the things that are going around. Those videos are people, YouTubers just seeking attention and seeking views for their money. The vaccines are safe.
Dr. Boachia, let me ask you this last question. Have you taken your shot yet?
Long time ago. I can send you a picture of it if you want.
You can send us a video. We'll be very grateful. But thank you very much, both Dr. Boachia and Dr. Amponsa Achianu. But before we go, today on No Man's Land, our message is simple. Since the mid-20th century, Ghana has administered about 13 different vaccines, including those of the 6 childhood killer diseases, an effort which has eliminated these diseases from this country. And as you did hear Dr. Amponsa Achianu say, we've not recorded a case of measles for the longest time, and practitioners who have gone through the recent training to become doctors themselves have not had the experience of dealing with a measles case. To date, however, in the United Kingdom, people are still diagnosed of measles because such persons did not take the vaccination shots for measles, based on a number of reasons, including conspiracy theories by anti-vaxxers. Once again, like any time a new thing is introduced, especially in medical sciences, conspiracy theories have arisen in respect of the COVID-19 vaccines, and anti-vaxxers are peddling it strongly. Interestingly, however, this time round, against anciently held myths about Africans being used as guinea pigs, the trialing of these vaccines were done extensively in Europe, Asia, and the Americas, with very limited involvement of the African continent. Now, Western and Eastern nations who possess the financial, pharmaceutical capacity, as well as the logistical wherewithal, are scrambling over these vaccines at the expense of African nations that are very deficient in this regard. As Providence would have it, Ghana once again gets to blaze the trail against the pecking order of things and be the first African country aside South Africa, which was the only African country involved in the trialing of the vaccine, to get to have delivered the first tranche of these vaccines for the commencement of the vaccination program here in Ghana. An interesting fact about the COVID-19 vaccines approved for use so far across the world is that besides the efficacy of some of the vaccines varying from country to country depending on the strain dominant in that jurisdiction, as well as environmental conditions, all of the vaccines have passed the safety test. What that means is that even if a vaccine does not work for you, it cannot harm you. So, here on Candid Voice, we call on you listening to us, watching or reading this, that Ghana has the opportunity once again to lead the trail in stemming the COVID-19 tide with this vaccination program. Given that the virus is communicable, no one is safe until all of us are safe. Be ready for the shot to keep yourself, your family, your loved ones, your community, and Ghana safe. Do it for yourself. Do it for Ghana. Take the shot. And this has been our show, Candid Voice. This particular episode, the last in the month of February, and I've been privileged to have Dr. Justice Boachia, who is a medical practitioner, a clinical research fellow, and also an immunovaccinologist, who joined us all the way from the United Kingdom. Also joining us has been Dr. Kwame Amponsa Achianu, who is the program manager for the expanded program on immunization for the Ghana Health Service, also joining us to speak to us about these matters. We want to say a very big thank you to them, and for all of you who tuned in to listen to us, to watch us, to engage with us. We say thank you for joining us. My name is Benjamin Ofeado. I've been your regular host. Have a wonderful night and get ready to take the shot. Once again, have a good night.